I'm Kevin Rinke, and I'd like to welcome you to Beyond the Echo. I ran for governor in Michigan. After losing that election, my desire to look at issues that are important to the state or the country grew. There is so much static. There are so many opinions. Our news stations have gotten to the point where we don't know what news is anymore. Where do you go to get real facts? This is about real perspective for you. Beyond the Echo will cut through all the smoke, all the opinions. It's not about Republicans. It's not about Democrats. It's about the issues and what are real. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Echo. I have a repeat visitor, our first repeat visitor. I'm talking to Pam Good. Yes. And Pam was on about 4 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, Beyond the Echo, and we talked about literacy. And Beyond Basics is Pam's company, and they provide an opportunity that I think that the state of Michigan needs to take advantage of, that America needs to take advantage of. And during that conversation, we talked about the reasons and the failures within public education that kids can't read to grade level efficiency. We talked about setting people up for success and to be productive in society. And I challenged Pam to come up with a program for the state of Michigan that could be implemented. And the goal would be 94% grade level efficiency in reading for every kid. That's every black kid. That's every yellow kid. That's every red kid. That's every white kid, and any color kid that I missed in between. That's single parent kids. That's traditional family kids. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are, you will have the gift of being able to read. And Pam's here today to talk to me and to talk to us about what her plan is. So thanks for coming back. I am really excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm glad that you want to hear.
Absolutely.
Because obviously education in America has been on a downward spiral, I would say, for probably 40 years. And
Does
literacy,
it coincide with the Department of Education?
I know that it coincides with switching the way we teach kids how to read. So, and that came out in the early 80s. Is that 40 years or 50 years? Do the math on that.
Let's not plus not. We're about 44 years now.
Yes. So I know that taking out the literacy piece, right? We were on a downward path, and we still uphold a model of great education, but kids just cannot access it. And when you have probably 60% of your kids, 8th graders across the nation, that do not read proficiently, it's very evident now that we have to put literacy at the front. And so how do we do that, given that you have so many kids, right? So many kids that can't read at all. And over the last 25 years, I mean, most of our work has been in the vulnerable community of Detroit and the surrounding areas. We've just recently expanded around the state. But I've learned a lot about education and the way we're not delivering programs the way we should, especially to the most vulnerable. Because, at a higher socioeconomic area, parents can take control in their own and find a tutor and get a child reading, right?
And may or may not get a result.
And may or may not get a result.
In
and
Michigan,
that's true.
Our three most affluent counties, have roughly a 50% literacy rate.
Yes, we have. I've said it before. In Oakland County, you have close to 65% non-proficiency in reading.
Completely unacceptable.
Yes,
I grew up in Grosse
kids.
Pointe, which is, the rich white suburb.
Yes.
And less than 50% of the kids can read with proficiency at grade level.
Yes.
Grand Rapids, the same way. So this is not about how much money you have in your pocket.
No, it's not. It's everywhere now.
Yeah, this is about how we approach a situation, and can we resolve that situation if we really want to do good things? Because here's my belief, Pam, and if you can't read, you are dependent.
Yes.
And you are
Yes.
dependent on what has become the largest entity in our society, which is government.
Yep. Social services.
And social services. And that's not good. And well-intended people, like your issue of reading proficiency is passionate for me. And I think that I'm a reasonably smart guy, but I have a level of humility that says, on this issue, I'm going to an expert.
Well, thank you.
And you're my expert. And I think that there are other socially prolific individuals who think they have great ideas that treat symptoms of the problem that don't have the solution. And I'm going to tell you, folks, this lady right here has a solution, and it works, and it is real. And we shouldn't negotiate the plan that Pam's going to present to us. We should implement it.
Yes.
And it's not about
absolutely
her business being financially successful.
Yeah.
It's about what we're doing for our kids. And so on that point, tell us more.
Yes. So, I think that, the last 40, 50 years, we've been spiraling down in a lot of ways.
Right.
And given that we were in Detroit running our programs, we were able to see, the carryover that the vulnerable issues that people have where education isn't meeting them there. And they walk away from being, in school for 13 years and they still can't read. And so I've watched for 25 years how things were running and things that we could do to just modify the system and bring about great results. And I think there's the issues of literacy, and then how do we triage that? And then there's some additional things that I like to talk about at the end, which is that crossover. How do we better take care of all of our children, even the most vulnerable ones? But when it comes to literacy, there is a gold star standard. And I know last time we talked about how there are 40 states moving to a science of reading curriculum. And that is wonderful to know. I mean, it's an Orton Gillingham based program. It teaches phonics and decoding. And that is what we've been using all these years to get kids reading at grade level in 6 weeks. And so the curriculum is definitely a piece.
That works.
That works.
It's irrefutable.
It's irrefutable.
And it's called phonics.
It's called phonics and decoding. It's a model that's under Orton Gillingham. The title now that's been in the press, because they have these reading wars, it's called the science of reading. And it's pretty much any kind of method that's using phonics and decoding to teach kids is the science of reading now.
And our public education systems have eliminated phonics.
They eliminated it and went towards a whole language approach, which is not an approach to teach kids to read.
Tell us more about that. What makes that approach unsuccessful?
It doesn't teach kids the sounds of letters. It doesn't teach them how to group syllables so that they can break down a word. And they're left really trying to guess and, use cues to how to understand by the pictures and the title. And in fact, some of the states are banning what they call 3 cueing, where you're looking for 3 cues to help you figure out the sound of a word.
Can I ask a crazy question?
Yes.
In my lifetime, when I was a child, okay, the Black community spoke proper English. The Mexican community spoke proper English. And I think during those years that phonics and sounding were successful. And as reading has diminished, slang has grown in different languages that people don't understand outside of the specific community has grown. And I think that adds to mistrust, lack of acceptance, and a whole bunch of negative things. I think reading and understanding is a core principle that brings us all together.
And it's language, to your point.
Language.
They still needed to communicate with each other, so they created their own language in order to do that. I think literacy, by taking away, removing it out of education, getting kids to read, is probably has the greatest ripple effects of the downward spiral for our nation. Illiteracy, as you grow up, is connected to almost every social ill. And it's also created other pipelines of money that's pretending to take care of people that quite simply is not. It's just taking away their choice and keeping them oppressed. And so when you get, it controls, because if you can't take care of yourself because you can't work and you can't read, you really are dependent on the government right now, because that's who really has taken that center point. But they're not caring for them. It's a tremendous amount of money, but it's not, there's no accountability and to actually do right by people in it.
Money isn't the solution. It may be the root of all evil.
Yes.
And many times.
How it's used. I think the power of money is really in the person holding it. And, it seemed to be an easier way, maybe, than walking alongside people and helping them. And definitely, we have some things to change, but that really started a process for the spiral down, and human beings had to, compensate, right? So they created their own language. Right. But I think all these years later, implementing phonics and decoding, we know what curriculum works. That's an essential piece. But I will tell you what they've also has been diminished is that individual assessment. We really need to take every child, especially those reading below grade level, and give them an individualized assessment. It's like going to the hospital. If you needed surgery, you'd get an x-ray. We need that laser focus. And what's happening is the assessments nowadays are putting kids, they're norming kids. It's like grading on a curve. So you don't see that Johnny is reading at second grade level when he's in the fifth grade. He looks like he's reading at a fourth grade level. Starting those points, it waters it down, but you're giving him what will never help him learn, because he needs those foundational. So we need to implement a strategic one-on-one assessment. I believe that's delivered by a third party. And I also believe that it should be delivered at 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th grades.
You and I have had this argument because I believe it should start at kindergarten.
I know, because at kindergarten, so think about this. You can't read at kindergarten, right? But you start learning.
Implement the foundations.
You implement it. But through games, it can be in small groups. Absolutely. It can be in the classroom. So definitely, and I think part of the triage plan is that the schools would continue to focus on K3, getting kids reading by 3rd grade. And they would use the science of reading now, decoding and phonics, and actually help kids in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade learn through that method. You would have fewer children by 3rd grade that needed the individual one-on-one. And so that's when most kids are developmentally ready. All kids by 3rd grade.
Yeah. We look at examples where in a traditional world, people will say, that's too expensive. Or we're public education and we can't do individualized assessments. Or you're not being sensitive to the environment that some of our non-readers grow up in. And they start making excuses or reasons why. And
I call that penny wise and pound foolish. And on this issue, it absolutely is pound foolish.
It happens to be something that economics and cause and effect are something that resonates with me. And I remember when Art Laffer, who is a very famous economist, introduced something called the Laffer curve. And what it said was, if you lower taxes, you will increase tax collections. And people said, absolutely can't happen. That's not true. That's not how it works. And Ronald Reagan lowered taxes and they dramatically increased tax collections, because people were still spending their money.
Yes.
One was by their choice versus the government simply taking. And in this particular instance, I don't believe in general that the government wants dumb people. I don't believe that teachers want dumb students. But I believe that the government's misguided and is using excuses because it doesn't have the courage to say, you know what, minority kids can read just as well as wealthy kids if we set up a program and, for lack of a better term, mandate that program is the number one element in education. If you can't read, really in today's world, you are totally dependent. And what I think it does on the far left is scares people because the smarter, more educated people are, the more questions that they ask, the more accountability that they demand, and the bigger their dreams. The power of being able to read. You know, when I was a kid, I went all over the world. I went to the moon and back in books.
Yes.
I understood about the mountains in Switzerland, the plains in Africa, and never was there. We didn't have 300 TV stations. We couldn't look up on YouTube what it looks like. We had to read about it. And God, that was so powerful in the dreams, and you got to live it. It was real. And it fostered communication. It fostered society. It fostered family. And as we've lowered the ability to read, it's like screws are coming out of other institutional pieces.
Destroying lives.
That make America strong. And so the reason that I'm passionate about it, the reason I support you, the reason I think we need to do this is for the kids first, but for our cities, for our counties, for our states, for our country, because smart people make better decisions. Crime goes down. Unnecessary pregnancies go down, drug use goes down, etc. I mean, you can go after social issue,
workforce increases.
Absolutely. The quality of work increases. And like the Laffer curve, if we teach kids to read, if we make them stronger or give them more of their personal income, the government ultimately will collect more by the results that the people produce for it. And that's a strong America, and that's a strong Michigan, and we're missing out on that, and we need to stop and change it now.
Illiteracy oppresses people in our nation. And when they're oppressed, they feel shame, they lose dignity, and it causes a spiraling down in other ways. And the power that literacy brings when, and I hear this from kids. I remember a fifth grader one year, when you can read, you just know stuff because you can find out whatever you want to find out. And it's even easier now because you can go online and, but you're able to read it. And so, I'd like to go back and say that, this hasn't been a solution, this whole language approach has not been a solution that the teachers have advocated for. I think the teachers and the principals in the schools are really the heroes in the system, that whatever those, creating the laws about how the classroom is run, they just keep putting things in the classroom that aren't working. And the teachers are trying to take tools that are not working and manage the classroom anyway. And so I really commend the teachers, but the leadership that's deciding.
It's easier to blame teachers.
It's easier because that's who you see every day. But whoever's deciding the curriculum, the dosage, and what they have access to and not access to. Like right now in the schools, they're really not able to give one-on-one. It's not approved for them to give one-on-one tutoring for
You're actually
kids
looked
illiterate.
down on as a teacher if you put in that personal effort one-on-one. There's consequences to doing the right thing.
Yes, we have spiraled in the wrong direction. And And so I think how to fix it is the curriculum. It is definitely the assessment. And then what is missing, and it is directly connected to money, is anybody who is more than a grade level behind absolutely needs to get one-on-one tutoring. No questions asked, because we have tested it enough times to know if we could have 2 kids at a time and reduce our costs and serve twice as many kids, we would do it. If they are more than a grade level behind, they have to be given one-on-one. And it is
there
an
enough money in the
intensive,
system
an
to do
hour a
that?
day, 5 days a week. And those kids in an average of 6 to 10 weeks are reading.
Yeah. Is there enough money in the system currently to do that if they chose to allocate it correctly?
What I would say is the pipelines that are going, that are not moving the needle forward, should be reallocated to fund literacy. And once we get the backlog, all the kids that should have learned by 3rd grade, those 4th through 12th graders reading, that money then can be diverted back to other things. But
So
you
in
will
essence-
not get kids educated if they cannot read.
We agree on
Yes,
that.
yeah.
And
So some of those budgets, you want to know what budgets I believe that you could change and
yeah,
prosper?
I want to hear all your opinions.
So we have had the same miserable levels of non-proficiency for decades. We could
identify
take,
those.
well, the National Assessment of Educational Progress has been showing you that you have 60% of 8th graders that are below proficiency. We should just take that, the assessment budgets that they've been using the last 3 years, and allocate them towards assessments and tutoring for kids. And then in 3 years, let's test and watch that number go up, right?
You mean spending
So
money on results versus spending money
Yes.
on getting a test
we
result?
measure every
that-
year how kids have not grown. That's what we've done for 20, 30 years.
Isn't that the definition of insanity?
Yes, possibly.
Possibly. Yeah. Is literacy and
Possibly.
insanity
I mean,
associated?
I
I
think
don't know.
that I more and more I say this quote now. It's the path to destruction is paved with many good intentions.
Of course.
And it's symptom relief, what you brought up earlier. We go after symptom relief. It's easier than the cure. But we're at a time in America where we have to go after the cure. Literacy is a cure. And when we get a child reading in a family, it is generational. It helps that family who may not know how to read manage life. And those children of that child that just learned to read will be readers. We break the generational cycle of that. And so,
That is so
the ripple
powerful.
effects are huge.
What I find interesting, and I have had this conversation in Oakland County, I've had it in Grosse Pointe in my home community where I grew up, I've had it in Grand Rapids, is people look at you and say, you're lying.
Yeah, they don't believe the reality.
They don't believe the
yeah.
reality.
Yes.
And I was at a fundraiser in Florida, and there was a group of people from Chicago, a very affluent part of Chicago. In Chicago had just come out with the assessment.
Oh, yeah.
And it said that only like 30% of the kids in that community could read.
Yes, that's true.
And there were a group of parents that said that assessment was flawed. And I said, to what end? They are admitting a vulnerability, and you're saying that they're wrong when they're telling you the truth. Just because your kid might be able to read doesn't mean that every kid can read. And it doesn't mean that there's not enough money in the system. We don't have to tax more. We don't have to ask for a budget increase. What we need to do is, as you said, allocate the existing dollars
Yes, reallocate.
correctly. And some people may not like that.
Well, it disrupts the system, but I think we've
What
gotten
would
to
you
a
cut out?
point. I think that we've gotten to a point where we let the budget set the goal. We need, especially when it comes to our children, that the need sets the goal, right? The need all these children, right? People are overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problem right now. Fortunately, 6 to 10 weeks for every child. They're already showing up to school. It's an easy fix, really, when you think about it. But there's so many of them need it. They start with how much money it's going to cost, and then they don't bother to move forward. We have to just start triaging this and give our children what they need. And this is still the most prosperous nation, right?
So-
we have resources to do it.
Yeah.
This is a blindness on our part, and we need to start advocating for every child that they have the tools of literacy as a starting point.
So what's more important, a brand new school building or a kid being able to read?
Yes. I would say reading, but I'd also
What's
say
more
in those
important,
communities,
a fancy football field or a kid being able to read?
of course, reading.
What's more important, a swimming pool or a kid being able to read?
Of course, it's reading.
Yeah.
That is the beginning. Yes.
And you
it
know
should
what?
be.
This isn't this isn't a political thing.
No, this is about our children.
This is do you care about your kid? And for parents, what might be challenging is they didn't have that commitment from their parents or from the community that they grew up in or society at that given time. And it's a huge leap forward. Parents have become conditioned to say, we'll figure out a way to navigate around these deficiencies in the hopes that their kids will be taken care of or that things will be okay. But God, in the last 15 years, it's almost like America has gone over the top of the hill and started to come down. People argue about the fact. I read that America was ranked in education 127th in the world. Now, I don't know. Maybe it's 120th.
This is the cornerstone of why.
Yes.
Yes, it absolutely is. It's
And what I'm trying to share with the people who are going to see this and hear about this is that what Pam's talking about or what I'm talking, these are real numbers. America is the greatest country in the world, but we are taking on water. We're sinking because we're not preparing our future generations to be a continuation of the greatest country in the world. And we can. It's a choice that parents should demand, that teachers should demand. Their job becomes easier. Isn't it easier to control an educated kid than an uneducated kid? I would think that it would be.
Absolutely.
Those kids aren't acting out.
Yeah. This is a silent epidemic. And one reason it is that you would not guess that the high school kids are reading at an elementary level because they can speak. They've learned to speak. They've learned words. They've learned the meaning of words. They just don't know how to read and write them. So they're blind to words. So the child appears like reading isn't an issue. The child themselves are going to hide it because they know they can't get something. So they actually develop an aversion to learning. Wherever you see the written word, they're going to do something else. They're not really going to focus on that.
Could that be a byproduct? Might that be like an increase in ADD?
Well, what I was just about to say.
I interrupted.
That's
I
okay,
apologize.
but you're proving my point. What ends up happening is that child is exhibiting things that are holding him back. And they're given IEPs, which say that they have some learning difference, some learning disability, even if you will, right? And so they're given a label.
Medicate it.
But that's a label. Well, some of them they do medicate. ADHD, they do medicate. So we've given a lot of labels in education that are not addressing the real issue, which is the kids that couldn't read. I just had this situation come up yesterday. There's somebody whose child has been given an IEP. It's a fourth grader, and they say she has an IEP, and I have to decide a tutor for this child. If this child really has disabilities, I need to make sure that it's somebody who's used to working with kids that may not be as easily interactive as another, or whether I could just give them, one of our other great tutors. And there were two indications on that. How far behind was that child reading? that child's reading a second grade level. That tells me that that child probably doesn't have any other disabilities, that they just didn't learn to read, and it's manifesting itself as a disability. And so
I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
Pam, you are one of the most compassionate, beautiful souls that I have ever met.
Thank you.
Do you challenge yourself when you look at these? Do you put yourself through a litmus test, or do you fall to that compassion?
Oh, you have to weigh out the compassion for what's strategic for everybody.
And I think that's important that people, again, understand.
It is. So every child needs to get served. So here we're talking about kids that are farthest behind, right? And we need to get tutoring to those children. But the plan would really be to start with the kids closest to grade level, because it's so quick and they are able to flourish and work our way. And obviously we work with all of them at the same time, but you can't serve those that are farthest behind and miss those that are most of the children that also need help.
Which is exactly
and so
the
we
opposite.
do have to do what you do. We're triaging.
Yes, it's exactly the opposite of what Pam is describing. Is kids that are just a little behind can be addressed and start to excel. And at the end of the day, that doesn't increase the separation. What it allows us to do is decrease the separation from the exceptional student and the kid that maybe just isn't quite as smart, but at least they can read, at least they can write because they can read, at least they can cognitively put together and maybe do math at a different level. So, like I said, the Laffer curve.
Yes.
Instead of, decreasing the end result, we increase the end result by flipping what looks to be obvious upside down.
I'll tell you how that works. In education, they measure high achieving schools by how many kids you have in the high achieving, high proficiency area. It doesn't mean that you don't have children in the low proficiency, below proficiency, right?
Of course.
So what happens if you want to get in that high achieving school marker, you get kids as quickly as you can into the high achieving bucket. It will bring more people to your school, give you more resources, and allow you more time to get everybody moved up into that the high achieving bucket. So it really does foster success instead of focusing on the weakest of the weak only, because it takes so long before you even get to those that can run with it. So it is a combination of compassion. I don't like to let kids go just because they needed more and the money's out. So that's why we do sponsor a child. And we have a bank account, if you will, that we can sponsor kids for that extra. Because one cycle, if you have an 11th grader reading at a second grade level, our average of, 6 to 10 weeks isn't going to work for them. They're going to need a double dose. And we like to walk alongside and double dose kids. So that's where you see the compassion side, but it just causes us to go raise money for it. We don't let the lack of a budget for it say, oh, well, we can't help you. We have to start counting these kids, figuring out what the dollars are. And this is something, our model, we are philanthropically funded. We have individuals, corporations, foundations, school districts, and the state of Michigan funding us. This is a private private-public partnership, really, that the government needs to contribute heavily. But we as individuals in our communities need to wrap around our schools and make sure that every child gets reading. I think the number one priority in America is our children. We're doing a terrible job of it right now. We need to focus on it. And as we look at every child to get them reading, we can look at that expanded area around them and start to fix it very strategically. And one of my tweaks, as I said before, to really reset, especially our inner cities like Chicago, you brought up, and Detroit and Baltimore and Cleveland and Indianapolis and Lansing and Flint. I mean, the list goes on, right, of vulnerable communities. We really should establish residential schools for all kids who are in foster care and homeless.
Help me understand. What is a residential school? How does that work?
Residential schools in affluent areas would be known as private schools. Right? We took away orphanages a number of years ago and we privatized we created foster care where we're going to have kids in individual homes. It is a horrible, broken system that isolates children and really neglects foster care. Not to say that there aren't some lovely homes out there, but by and large, especially in vulnerable communities, it is a wicked system. We need to put those kids in what I say. We know Brookside, right? We know some really great private schools. They should be part of establishing residential schools for children in districts, especially vulnerable communities where we have a high rate of kids in foster care. And at that residential school, they would live there, they would be educated there, they would be fed there, they would get homework after school. It would be a residential school. We have to triage the kids. In Bloomfield, they have an alternative high school. We need to those kids that need more need to be not in a big public setting with 500 kids in a school. We need to pull them out into smaller communities and get them literate and get them. What we have in our government right now in education, and let me remind you, I think of we the people as the government. So we the people are the ones to change. So when I'm focusing on government, it's the collectiveness of us. Yeah. We people have to demand better.
See, I'm a huge supporter of yours, and you just scared me.
Oh, why?
And I'll tell you why. Because when I think of fixing the problem, I don't think of housing children in entities, feeding children in those entities, educating them in those entities, orphanages. I mean, there was that social movement that said, oh, this is going to be much better. And I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah, it's brutal what happens in foster care.
And I don't know necessarily what happens.
So it's an idea. I think my idea of throwing that out there starts the conversation.
I think it's great.
Doing better, right?
I think it's great. But I'm just simply saying it just fell on me and I went, wow, Pam, I have never heard you say that before. That's more than what I was thinking because I'm not an expert. Okay. And I'm willing to listen, but I want to keep the kids ideally in the public schools and have the public schools perform.
I love public school and I'm an advocate for them.
And by the way, I want there to be private schools as well. Yeah. A separate issue. Yes. But the public schools...
many foster care children don't make it to school, public. Many do not make it. They're isolated. Where can you go and get a roster of foster? They've lost being visible in our society to any point that you can really navigate it. So the fact that we would bring them in and start looking at them as worthy to be cared for is a beginning point. It would probably be very difficult at first to figure it out, right? But what's happening right now is it's a path to abuse our children. And another one is there's nearly 35,000 kids that in school are registered as homeless, and it'd probably be at times. How can you educate a child that at the end of the day they're going to be homeless? Like you're just going to send them out to where? In America, we are not taking care of our children.
There was a pretty good example in a feel-good movie called The Blind Side.
Yes.
And Michael Orr just happened to be an athlete as well. And you could say that it wasn't really noble or the intention wasn't necessarily to educate. It was to win a football game.
Yes.
But at the same time, they educated, and obviously
Yeah, you should have Curtis Blackwell on.
I'm gonna
sound mind, sound body.
Absolutely.
And we actually, partner where we get the kids that go for the athletics. We are able to get them literate, and now they can take advantage of not only the scholarship for football, but also other sports, but
Sure.
also the scholarship for academics.
Well, you had sent me a couple of different names that I'm going to get to Tony, and we will have those folks on because, like so many things, it's a puzzle.
It is.
And to make a puzzle complete, you have to be able to put the pieces together.
Yes.
And, my hope is that you can not only put the puzzle together, but put it together in a fashion utilizing existing dollars. Because I happen to think that there is so much waste in our education system that we don't need to ask society to give more. We need to reallocate. We need to hold accountability.
It's illiteracy that's spiraled it down.
Absolutely.
It's the reason that the Detroits and the Chicagos have not been able to rise out of poverty.
Michigan in and of itself, how important is it? The state of Florida, which is similar in population to the state of Michigan, okay, has 11 school districts in the state. Michigan has 796 school districts.
I think we have 10 regions. And within that, how many districts we have? We have quite a few districts because we do that.
Is there an opportunity to save by having less districts?
I think that's one of the things that needs to be discussed, really. What should be the way we govern? I know that years ago, there was a study done to show that it wasn't so much the classroom size of a school that impacted the child, it was the school side. And that any community over 350 kids, you would have kids that would fall through the cracks, right? So I think it's more than how many districts. I think it is that school side that we go to smaller community schools so no child falls off the radar. When you have 1,000 kids in a school, you don't have the teachers knowing where they are and what's going. It's just too big of a community.
Well, look at our area where you and I live.
I know it.
My God, the high schools look like college campuses now.
And the kids are falling through the cracks.
To your point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a number of conversations we need to have around these issues.
Is it obtainable?
What better? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think literacy is number one because the ripple effects of that are huge. But there are other things to fix in the system because we have a broken social service system that is causing many, many children to not be able to access education. And illiteracy is getting in the way for many people in every school district, right? All of those learning differences we mentioned, dyslexia, autism, ADHD, English language learners, they're able to learn English, believe it or not. And we need to work with them to get them, reading and writing in English. And so there's many, many things that we could do to help the system be better.
Describe a day in the life of a kid in a public school. What's it look like if we're doing the right thing to get them literate, in your view?
Oh, what is that like?
Yeah, what's the day look like? They show up for school.
They show up to school, and one of their hours out of the day, they come to the Beyond Basics room. They sit down next to a tutor. They spend an hour of time learning how to read using the, phonics and decoding and learning to write. And they go back to the classroom. After a week of that, they already know how to look at words differently. And
so you're saying the only thing we need to change is 1 hour a day.
Yes. 1 hour a day for 10 up to 10 weeks for the kids. Like we rotate cycles on quarters, and our high school kids, we actually become the class for them. So they come to us the same hour and we have them for one semester. And in that time frame, we are able to get them reading, and then they go back to the classroom able to participate, and it changes their lives. Changes their lives. I mean, I've had grown high school kids. We serve them in 11th and 12th grade, and I'll get a text or a phone call, and they usually call me Miss Pam. They'll be in a doctor's office. Miss Pam, I just wanted you to know I'm at the doctor's office by myself. I didn't need my mama to come with me. I was able to fill out the form all by myself. Simple things like that they're able to do now because they learn to read. And our system allows us to graduate them not reading. And so one of those other tweaks is to connect the educational dollars that are already given to ensuring that every child gets the literacy intervention they need that year.
Yeah, see, one of the policies that I wanted to run on was that we would not allow a high school student in Michigan to receive their graduate degree if they couldn't read at grade level.
Yeah, let's make that happen.
You know what? I'll work on that. That's a good thing. And
the focus is still K-3 in education.
No question.
But we do need to make sure that those, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders get what they need before they leave, because otherwise it's a death sentence for them.
Yeah, if it's 1 hour a day for 10 weeks, the impact in 1 year, unbelievable. The impact in 2 years, unbelievable. 3 years, incredible. 3 to 4 years, we could be the most literate state in America.
Yes, and the districts blossom. Some of the districts are so small. In 1 year, they could get all of the kids in the literacy gap reading. A district like Detroit and like Chicago are so large that it's going to take 5 to 7 years maybe. Once we start tackling it efficiently, we'll be able to figure out whether it's closer to the 5 years. But it's just because there's so many kids. So we can look back on this problem, the majority of it, in 3 to 5 years.
What are you seeing? Is you've now been functioning 25 years?
Yes.
Yeah. What are you seeing in the school districts around the state? Are people starting to come around to this concept? What could we do to accelerate it? How do we get them to even look at it and consider it for those that aren't?
Well, it comes with funding, right? And so we have corporations that fund us to specific schools. Wherever we have the funding, the schools usually are in agreement that they want that support. So the teachers and the principals, they're in favor of getting their kids literate.
Well, see, I want them to fund it with the money they're already getting. It's okay that we can have outside money.
Well, that's a different conversation. And,
so I saw me with that conversation because we got to get there.
Yes. Our route was really the funding. There was no pipeline of money going to literacy. And we raised it to first prove that the kids are able to learn to read. And honestly, in a remarkably short period of time. What we have amassed is close to 4,000 children in a longitudinal study in one of the lowest performing vulnerable communities, Detroit. We have data to show that K-12, they are able to read. And with that knowledge alone, we should have the top business leaders, the top government people, the top foundations all at the table to triage how do we do that. And I've thought about that a long time. And the fact that we have kids showing up to school already, and we just have to take them aside for 6 to 10 weeks, an hour a day to get them reading.
Shouldn't be that hard.
We should be doing that. And it's a partnership with the schools, because the schools could focus on K-3 while partners are flattening the curve in 4th through 12th. But once we get the backlog of students that never learned reading, the schools really will be able to take it from there. They just would, they would just have to be, those assessments and being able to deliver the one-on-one tutoring to kids who really need it. They would have to be given the liberty to, continue to do it well and continuing to use the right curriculum.
Sure.
But partners right now, because it is a crisis crisis. It's an epidemic. They need partners to walk alongside and help get kids literate as well as we can and as fast as we can. And we just need the people at the table. And there's more than enough money to go around and solve this. And think about this: we pay way more than 50% of our tax dollars go to social services. As we send a child out into the world, this was prior to COVID. More than 50% of our tax dollars in Michigan went to social services. It included incarceration, because they have 85% of those are illiterate there. To diminish the cost by empowering people is the American way, right? And so the money we start saving, because you have a workforce that can show up and can participate, you have incarceration that go down. We just tutored kids. I think I mentioned in the juvenile project, what a beautiful place to reach kids that when they're in any sort of a situation where they're someplace for a couple months, we can get them literate while they're there and change their lives. And, it's just mind-boggling that we don't do that, because this is the pay me now or pay me later. And, on average, it's $3,500 a child. They're definitely worth that. And the pay me later is for the rest of their lives, every month for the rest of their lives. And they do not want to live that life. Nobody does.
Yeah.
And so I say, this is the cheapest thing that you can invest in to change this nation. The ripple effects are generational, and we need to get around the table and start talking about it and just deciding what's the next step, right? What are we going to invest in today? And taking care of those precious little ones
How
should
do we get
be
that
at the
message out to more people, to more businesses?
Well, let me know. I've been talking about it for a long time. So hopefully, it's divinely ordered, I suppose. We'll have to see when it's time for that to happen. But I'm more than ready, and we could triage this. I could have a triage plan for this state in a week. We just need the literacy gaps in all the districts. I mean, some of the districts, Kevin, the gap is so small. Right? You get Troy, they have 2,000 kids that need it. We could train some of their own literacy coaches. They could flatten their own curve. So if you had districts that had 30% or less in the gap, they could be trained to flatten their own curve. And then partners could be trained to walk alongside the districts that have more than 30% that are in the gap and get those kids reading. And we would start watching those numbers change in America. And we could become that beacon of light for the nation, because they could follow our lead. There are many nations right now embracing the curriculum, but that curriculum without assessment and one-on-one dosage is not going to move the needle for them. And so it's urgent that Michigan really take that step to try and triage this nation and show that every child is able, and we need to walk alongside them.
Here's what I just heard you say.
Yes.
That there are people already available.
Yes.
That could be utilized differently.
Yes. For a season.
Mm-hmm. And that the results would be measurable.
Yes. And would allow the good work that the teachers are doing every day
to be recognizable.
To blossom.
Yeah.
To blossom.
Blossom or recognizable. Yes. That it seems to me that would start to gain momentum.
It will.
Because say what you will, it's pretty cool to be smart.
Yes.
For every kid.
For every kid, yes.
And it's, there's a level of pride to be able to grow in experience.
It's dignity.
Yeah. And dignity. Yeah. So you've got people in the system, which means that there's already the money there. Because for me, and again, I'm not the expert on the issue you are. I have a belief that we give government a lot of money and that they don't efficiently and effectively spend that money. And I often say that if government were a private business, it would be out of business.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so I don't know that giving the government the money, I don't think that we have to do that. This is, partners and vendors can be utilized for these partners that come in. And so those partners can be funded just like we're funded. We're funded by General Motors and the high schools because they know the importance of reading for a strong workforce, right? So
But
the
we don't have a
funding can
strong
come.
workforce.
Well, they're working towards it. They recognize we don't, and they're
Yes.
trying to do their part by getting high school kids in Detroit reading.
So the issue is
Yes.
getting
Yes.
more
So
people.
so it doesn't necessarily have to give the government more money. I think that you could reallocate some of the, we have a lot of literacy coaches that have been funded, right?
Well, but that's
They
the
could be
government,
trained.
Pam,
That's
in my
government.
verbiage.
That is government, but they could be trained to do one-on-one tutoring.
Absolutely.
And now, after there's an assessment by a third party given that directs that, you could have them doing something that's measurable and having great impact.
We're saying the same thing
Yes,
using
we are.
different words because,
Yes.
when I say the government
Yeah.
already collects taxes
Yes.
that are allocated to educate our kids. From a simplistic view, we're giving more money for education than ever before, and our
Yes.
kids are getting dumber.
Yes. Yes.
And that, to me,
This would change it.
yes.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think-
what I want to point out
Yes.
is that we need to change it. It's okay to hold people accountable, but you can't hold them accountable until you have a plan to measure their accountability against.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we will see how often do you implement a plan at a state level that you're saying within 10 weeks there are bona fide results.
Yes.
And so that's what I want to emphasize,
Yes.
that the conversation actually requires, I think, at the Lansing level, the government level, for them to say, look, here's how we're going to do things. And that brings in the various unions, educational unions. It brings in the school districts, the teachers, whatever. And guys, it's not an option. It's mandatory, because we've been relying now for 50 years
Yes.
and accepting
Yes. Yeah.
lower and lower and lower results.
And we've convinced people that they're not able.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
When they stay, they are able. But
Yeah,
when you
I
stay
agree
in
with you.
school through 12th grade, you leave feeling that there's something different about you, that you couldn't get it. And the tragedy of it is that they're able to learn how to read in 6 to 10 weeks.
Right.
What a tragedy that they end up with a life. I call it a death sentence. And so we need to come together as caring, concerned people to not let the magnitude of the money nor the kids that need it get in the way, but carve out this plan of how we bring literacy support to every school district. And once we flatten this curve, once you get that backlog done, then education, now you will see that turning of the tide, right? Because the kids want to exceed, they want to learn, they want to do better. And it will shift it from a diminishing system where kids don't want to be there to one where we'll see prosperity again in a lot of ways that have nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
And that have to do with money.
Right.
So
I get it.
It covers all bases.
I get it. And
Yes.
it's not a simple solution, but it is a simple solution.
It's a simple plan.
And it's a simple plan.
Yeah.
And what it requires is something that a lot of us hate: discipline, focus,
Oh, well.
commitment,
Oh, well.
all those types of things.
It's really amazing because the blessing work is our tutors. I call it, they have the blessing work, right? I love sitting here talking to you, Kevin, and it is a blessing. But those tutors that are sitting next to that child, especially those older kids that feel like they can't, and watching the light go on and getting them to read. And so the beauty outweighs the effort. It just does.
Well, I saw that when I worked in autism.
Yes.
With the ABA counseling that was direct one-on-one.
Yep.
And you could see the relief in the child's eyes as they learn those skill sets. But it didn't just stop there.
No, it doesn't.
You'd come back and you would see it
Yeah.
in their siblings' eyes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because self-control and the ability to communicate better and more cognitively had an impact on those kids. And then you would look and you would see it in the mother's eyes.
Yes. Yes.
And then you would see it
They're
in
so
the
proud.
father's eyes.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a game changer.
It pulls off
And
a
it
false
works.
label.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
just
really
rips that
does.
off of an entire family, in all socioeconomic areas.
Yep.
So
Well, right
it's,
now, my ability is to talk about it.
yes,
And I'm going to keep talking about it.
wonderful.
And going to keep participating and learning more about it because she's the expert.
Thank you, Kevin.
I have a passion because I think we owe it to all of our kids.
We absolutely do.
And it's an area that if it's government that has to be the impetus of this, and I happen to believe in this case, government does need to be the impetus of it, that it is non-political government.
Yeah.
It's just the right thing. You know, parents should hold government accountable for this and encourage it, even if they didn't have access to it themselves, because it gives their kids a chance.
I mean, you said that America is the most prosperous nation in the world, and we all agree with you. But I do think that there's a measurement of the smiles on our children's faces. And they have diminished over the decades in America.
Of course.
And those children that are suffering everywhere, and you can see it on their face. And much of it is due to illiteracy because their parents have not been able to get out there and provide for them like they would have if they were able to read. And so
Totally agree.
this is the most important effort that our government, our corporations, our foundations, individuals, churches, we should all get around ensuring that our kids can read.
Yeah.
And, we just need to spark a movement that literacy is for everyone and it enables them to prosper in their lives.
Well, let's keep working at that.
Yeah.
And,
Sounds good.
I appreciate it. Pam's got a folder for me.
I have a big notebook here.
I get to study
the plan.
And we'll talk more about that. Pam, thanks for coming back.
Yes, thank you.
Your insight on things again. For the people that watch this, I'm lucky because I've had the opportunity to meet Pam and I understand her commitment and where her heart and her head is. And it inspires me that it is selfless in nature. And the results are so rewarding. And I got a touch of that. Like I said, when I was working in autism, and I got a touch of it when I worked in post-acute traumatic brain injury. The average person traditionally is just so focused on trying to survive and be successful that those soft things that create huge results are tougher to understand and have access to. So I've been blessed, been very fortunate to late in my career get exposed to those types of things. And it's coincided with meeting you. So thank you. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Another episode of Beyond the Echo comes to an end. And I want to thank Pam Good for her insights on literacy and for providing a plan. And now we've just got to start implementing that plan.
I agree.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Echo. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop us a comment and share the podcast with your friends. Stay connected and keep the conversation going by following us on social media. Until next time, keep exploring beyond the echo.